Hello and welcome to A Piece of String, the show that brings together comedians and scientific minds to ask and maybe answer the biggest of all questions ever. I'm Matthew Shribman, I'm a chemist and a bit of a biophysicist, and with me today are Josie Peters, an astrophysicist.
Hello there.
Sophie Ward, a biomedic and a neuroscience enthusiast.
Hello.
And special guest, James Hay, an epidemiologist.
Hiya.
Each of us will ask a question to which one of us secretly knows the answer. Points will be allocated on a tyro-arbitrary basis by our producer, Sam Lee. And the winner will get this map of the Southern Peak District, which I am holding.
I already know that, actually, off the top of my head, Matthew.
You know the whole
I don't
map?
think I need it, so can I go?
I'll get another prize for you, James. If you win. You won't win. So, Sophie, what's your question today?
Right, I've got a pet snake, and when someone's untrustworthy, you call them a snake, and I think that's really unfair on snakes. So, are there any other animals out there that are more untrustworthy than a snake?
Do you trust snakes?
Yeah, I do. My snake's called Zach, and I would trust him with my life.
Your life?
Yeah, that's big.
What about basic tasks? Like if you asked him to do a basic task?
Depends what the basic task is. If the task is eating a mouse, he can do that very well. If the task is slithering around, you can do that fantastically.
How often does eating a mouse appear on your to-do list for the day? And how often can you tick it off with the help of your snake?
On my to-do list?
Yeah.
Surprisingly a large amount, actually, eating a mouse. Yeah, I think, for my snake, it comes up kind of every couple of weeks, and then I sort that out.
So is this evidence-based that you've seen your snake do this? Or has the snake told you it can do that? Because, can you trust what it says?
Yeah, I can, I think. He's proved to me through his actions, through eating a mouse.
It's a trustworthy snake.
Yeah, he's very trustworthy.
So I had a friend who had a friend who had a friend.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And this friend had a pet snake, and it was quite a big snake, and for some reason she kept trying to feed it and just wasn't eating. It just wasn't eating. She was a bit concerned, a bit worried about her snake, and as a little thing to maybe appease it and perhaps make it feel more comfortable, she let the snake roam around the house. However, what actually apparently happened, which is definitely not true, is that she went upstairs for a nap and then woke up as the snake was lying next to her, dislocating its jaw to consume her in one whole gulp.
My snake's a corn snake and he's very thin, and he'd struggle to get beyond my big toe, to be fair. So I trust him very much.
Would you rather trust a dolphin or an elephant?
Elephant.
Why?
Because, I know, we end up talking about elephants quite a lot, but they seem trustworthy. They're very gentle, aren't they?
I actually have a bit of a story about deceptive dolphins. About how there was a dolphin that was given fish as a reward for clearing litter out of its kind of pool. And it always got one fish for one piece of litter. And there was one time that it was bringing back bits of paper, and they realised that what it was doing was found a bit of paper and it kept ripping off different bits and bringing them back individually to multiply its fish reward.
That's so smart.
Sneaky. But would that make? In some ways, would that make you trust them more? It make you trust them more with tactical missions.
If they're on your side, you would trust them, but
yeah, exactly.
not on the enemy's side.
Yeah.
Okay.
But whose side are they on, James?
I think they're on their own side, aren't they? Isn't that the whole thing about dolphins? Aren't they their own kind of civilization? Is that a Douglas Adams thing?
I think so, man.
And they're going to go off into space at the end.
But the dolphins are still here, so we're not in danger, right?
Well, it's not the rapture yet.
Okay, cool.
I think we've let snakes off the hook a bit, though. Do you not think there might be some basis for them being the least trustworthy animals?
I think it's because people think they slither, and so they can because they can slither out of your hands, they think that they can slither around moral code, but I don't think that's fair.
James might be onto something.
Have you guys heard of a snake detection theory?
No.
So there's a theory that human vision is so good just because we've evolved to avoid snakes. So they've done studies in chimpanzees and macaques and humans as well, where basically they give them really cryptic looking images with faint shapes of snakes or cats or bats or whatever. And it turns out that people are way, way better at identifying snakes than they are at any other animal. And also they did this other study in macaques where they kind of looked at the neuron firing pattern showing these macaques different pictures of animals. And they had way more neurons that were specific to firing against snake images than just the faces of other macaques. And they also fired way, way quicker. So it turns out there's this evolutionary advantage to being able to avoid snakes really, really fast.
I knew it. They knew snakes were
So-
sneaky.
I think this question is moot.
Doesn't everyone find snakes a bit trustworthy because of the whole like Adam and Eve Bible story?
Untrustworthy or trustworthy?
Untrustworthy.
Untrustworthy.
Leading
You
Eve
would have
to...
misinterpreted the story if you say trustworthy then.
Unless you're on the snake's side, Josie.
I mean, knowledge is a good thing. So, so what other sneaky animals are? Because I was thinking, what like foxes are kind of sneaky.
Yes, sly.
Sly fox, true.
I've said it before, I'll say it again. Cuckoos. Hate
Yeah.
cuckoos. The most untrustworthy animal is a cuckoo.
Yeah.
Goes into the nest, fake egg, given birth to. Horrible.
So is it untrustworthy in mating when some birds, well, I know about birds, have like false passages. It's not quite vaginal, I guess they're cloacas, aren't they? Because they've got like multiple routes. Is that untrustworthy that they've got multiple passages into their kind of mating organs?
It's more self-defense, I reckon, isn't it?
Yeah. So female ducks have multiple passages so that they can try and deceive male ducks into feeling like they've mated with them, but they haven't really.
This is also what apparently what koalas have. Female koalas originally had one passage, as we shall name it, but then they were like, actually, no, I want to kind of, have more of a decision on what's going on here, and so developed two. So one was a fake one and one was a real one. And then the male koalas got wind of it and was like, hang on, I'll develop two as well. So now I think...
Two penises.
Yeah, and so now
Classic.
the female
Absolute classic.
koala has 3 vaginas.
This is like a really well-known evolutionary phenomena called runaway selection. So it's this idea that like females choose males with particularly like extravagant displays because that might be a indicator of fitness. But then the selection acts not on the trait itself, but on the preference for the trait, right?
What does that mean?
So what I mean by that is that if you're kind of selecting for animals that have a stronger preference for, say, long tails, then that means that the males will have a selection pressure to have as long tails as possible, right? And those two genes will be linked. The gene that codes for preference for long tail and the gene for long tail. So because these two genes are linked, it means that as they propagate through lots of generations, the tails just get longer and longer and longer.
Gets out of hand.
It gets out of hand, Matthew, that's right. So there becomes like a kind of actual limit, though, on how long tails can be, right? Because you can't have a 3 meter long tail if you're a, 1 meter long bird, which would be a very long bird.
Can and will.
Go on then, mate. I'd like to see you try.
I'm on it.
So there's a really interesting like sexual adaptation in dunnocks. So, just your everyday garden dunnock where it's like we were talking about with the labyrinthine vaginas. So they have these kind of like reservoirs. Labyrinthine.
Cool.
They have these little reservoirs on the side of the vagina called cloacas. And what happens is the dunnock will mate with a male. It will store the sperm from that mating in this cloaca, and then it'll just basically wait to fertilize its eggs. It'll wait until it finds the male it most wants to have offspring with.
So what is a dunnock? What does a dunnock look like? I don't think I've
Like a
seen one.
little brown bird, like the size of a robin.
Oh,
What's the name of the fish that does that same thing where like the male will carry the young so that the female will still carry the eggs, but then the male will carry the developing young, but then if it wants to just digest the young because it decides, oh, actually that female wasn't that great, then it can.
isn't there that other?
That's pretty untrustworthy.
But has anyone actually researched a legit answer to this? Or
Oh yeah.
it was
I got us
Matthew
one.
Shribman all along.
I got us one. Right. So, true deception involves the following. The deceiver needs to, 1, know that the other animal has a mind. 2, to know that different animals' minds can believe that different things are true. So they have to be happy with the idea that another animal can be believing something differently to them, but also know that only one of those things is actually true, which like cognitively is quite an advanced thing, right? And then the final thing is that it knows that it can make another mind believe something false to be actually true. So it's pretty complicated, like true deception, and it really doesn't happen in many animals. So there's a lot of things that seem like deception, and we talked about quite a lot of them. Like the classic one is mimicry. Like so when animals try to look like other animals, so you get cuttlefish. So like when 2 male cuttlefish are battling over a female, and then the male that loses can then kind of go away, disguise itself as a female, and then come back. Sneak past the original male who's like, oh, cool, more females. And then secretly mate with like part of his kind of harem of females deceptively and sneakily. And the female cuttlefish actually seem to prefer this, because it's like they prefer that cuttlefish has been sneaky, which is quite a weird like evolutionary thing. And then obviously you got stuff like the midwater squid, which has like a bioluminescence that points downwards, because obviously if you're looking up from underneath in the ocean, then there's light at the top. And so fish and things that you could eat above you look dark, and so they make their bottom kind of light to deceive prey. But is that true deception? Maybe not. But in terms of like actual cognitive deception, of actually thinking about it and tricking another living thing, that generally seems to happen in mammals. Although there are some examples in birds of something like this happening. So like a marsh harrier can like court a male to obtain access to their food.
Basically exactly what happens in humans. You go on a date with a guy, so he buys you a burger.
Yeah, the same kind of thing, I guess. Yeah, so the female will court the male to gain access to the food, and then take the food and use it to feed chicks that have been fathered by another more preferable male.
That's what I do. I take the burger home and feed it to my child.
It's your clutch.
My clutch. Please don't bring my clutch up on iTunes.
But one of the best examples, I mean, a lot of the best examples are with primates, like gorillas. So there's this gorilla called Coco that learned sign language, and there was one point at which the gorilla got basically ripped a metal sink off the wall, and then her handlers came back, and they were like, "What's gone on here, Coco, mate? What's happened here?" And Coco basically signed that it wasn't her, that it was her pet kitten that did it, and like pointed to the kitten. The kitten looked innocently up at the humans.
I thought you meant like signed a formal contract, like after the legal proceedings was over, Coco signed the.
But obviously, if you are going to deceive other living things in your community, which generally happens with social animals, there's loads of examples of primates like shouting, "Oh, look, there's banana over there," when there isn't, or look, there's like a predator coming, so they can like steal food from other primates. But obviously, there's a social cost to that, because you're deceiving your mates, and they might start to throw you out of the group. So it does happen, but it's not hugely common. But of course, the most deceptive of all creatures that we know, the humes. So, James, have you got a little question for us, mate?
So you know how like not brushing your teeth or not calling your mum every week or so.
Yep.
Like what's the best bad thing for your health?
So we're saying what's the least bad thing of all the bad things?
Yeah, or like what's the bad thing that's actually maybe quite good?
Oh,
so
okay.
biscuits quite delicious, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And biscuits are probably good for you, right? Because if it tastes good and you
That's
feel
probably
good, that's just good. End of.
Taking risks.
Love risks.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, right. It's obviously, there are obviously dangers with taking magic mushrooms, right? Which I don't actually know much about, but I presume there are dangers. Are there? Probably. Anyway, but there's quite a lot of evidence mounting that the psilocybin in them, the active ingredient, could be really good for treating depression.
Is this, how well proved is this? What kind of evidence
it's not,
is there?
so the sample sizes are currently really small, but the difference in like positive response is enormous. Like people who've been completely resistant to treatment from any other thing, like SSRIs only work on like less than 50% of people, I think.
What's SSRIs?
Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So they basically like make sure there's more serotonin in your brain, but for most people they take a very long time to work anyway, and for most people they don't really help them that much. I think it's just above 50% who don't really notice much of a positive effect, and they're really hard to come off. Whereas psilocybin, the idea is that you just have it once in an environment which is controlled to make sure that it's a positive experience, because it can go wrong if you're not careful. And then your brain essentially has a very inspiring lesson which changes the chemistry of your brain, such that you then are much less likely to fall back into depression after having had this experience.
Just from one exposure?
Yeah, one single exposure.
So I don't know if like we'd heard of different things, because I'd heard of this before where they would put the patient in like a very sort of nice kind of sensory room where you're very relaxed and calm, and also put you with a therapist.
Yeah, and so one of the main things about the environment as well is music. Like you are really influenced by music apparently when it's in your brain. And so that's a very important part of creating a positive environment. But when they've tried these treatments, as I said, small sample size, much bigger tests need to be done. But basically, 90% approximately of people never get depressed again, or at least they've been measuring it for like a couple of years, I think, after this thing that I saw, but no tendency back. Yeah, it's really cool how it works.
Yeah.
It basically like because you're. This is not something I'm an expert on at all, but the idea is that there's part of your brain called the DMN, which kind of represents the sense of self. And when psilocybin is in your brain, that part turns off, and so you're a bit more disconnected from your sense of self. But then it activates all these receptors that make your brain a bit more kind of flexible and interlinked. So you have all these synesthetic experiences where you're like hear the things that you're seeing, and you might like taste the things that you can hear, and all that kind of stuff. And so you have this experience of interconnectivity of everything in the world. And then when the experience is over, the interconnectivity stops, and then your DMN switches on really strongly again. And so then you have this very strong sense of self, but within the context of this experience of the world being very interconnected and a place that you still have so much to learn about, because you sort of revert back to a childlike state of wonder. And for some reason, this experience can be incredibly positive for people.
That's so interesting. Like the sense of self thing is like super. So I went to a talk about virtual reality this week, in terms of how you can use VR and psychology. And it was kind of basing itself on this sense of self. So what they would do is you would put on a VR headset, an entire bodysuit as well, so that your body moved as you moved, so you felt as if the body you were in were yours. And so you'd be an avatar completely of yourself that had been like scanned to look like you, and you would talk to an avatar of Sigmund Freud and tell him what your worry was. What would then happen was you would in the VR headset be switched so that you were in the body of Freud, and you would have a mirror sort of showing your reflection and showing this. And you would then listen to yourself saying the problem. You would then offer your own avatar advice in the body of Freud, and then you would then switch back, but your voice in Freud's body would be changed, so it'd be a low or a higher pitch or something, so it didn't sound like your voice. And people were able to sort of disconnect themselves from themselves in a way and offer themselves much better advice in the way that you would offer a friend good advice, just from using this virtual reality. I thought absolutely fascinating.
You heard of ayahuasca?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a similar thing.
What is it? So
it's like a kind of natural drug based in like the Amazon basin, and you go on like this big kind of process before you take it. So you like go on a little trek, and then you take it, and you have to have a specific like shaman helping you take it to make sure you're doing it properly. And basically like you're really, really sick when you take it, like you're sick and really, really sick. And then that's meant to be like getting rid of your evils. And then eventually you have this kind of like feeling of being like connected to nature. And again, people have reported similar things of like, oh, you know, it helps people get closure over certain traumas and things like that. Obviously not recommending it, but I wonder if that's a similar process to the mushrooms thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think basically the neurology of it is that as you get older, your brain becomes less flexible and more likely to just retain the same ideas and not reorganize itself in the presence of new information. I can't remember what the receptor is, but there's some receptor which is in all the folds of the cerebellum, and humans have way more of it than any other animal that we know of, that allows us to kind of plastically like change our brain in response to new things. And that disappears as you get older. So these hallucinogenic drugs basically kind of activate all those receptors and make your brain really, really sensitive to learning new things and like opening yourself up.
I know drugs isn't it? I mean, drugs are maybe one of the, well, not always though, but they've got, I think it's like any bad thing, right? It's got the chance to have good effects.
It's like heroin is like clearly the worst drug that we know, and yet it's literally used in hospitals. Like if you need the strongest painkiller in the hospital, they will give you diamorphine. They won't say that it's heroin, but that's what it is.
Meanwhile, something like smoking tobacco, has that got any good effects? I don't think so.
Pretty much no.
Yeah, so I don't think that's competing to be a winner of your competition, James.
No, I mean I was thinking more like as well, like things that you might just have every day, like sugar or like alcohol or coffee. Because, you know, we talk about like, you know, alcohol's got the health benefit. If you have a certain amount per week, like you're more relaxed and stuff. Does anyone know much about that? Because I think recently they've there's a study that wants to revise the alcohol limit because, people are trying to claim that alcohol is not too bad if you have say 2 pints a week. But actually, they found recently that the lower limit of alcohol that you need to consume to be at increased risk of, say, like cancer is much, much lower than we previously thought.
Because isn't it like the first drink that you have genuinely is somewhat medicinal? And then once you start having more than one drink, that's when it starts getting bad for you?
The just under 2 pints hypothesis, isn't it? Everything goes much smoother at 1 and just under 2 pints.
The level of binge drinking, is so much lower than I think what we've kind of ended up thinking. Like it's 6 units in a session for a woman, 8 units in a session, or sesh, as I believe the kids call them these days, for a guy. And that's binge drinking. If you have more than 6 units in one go, that's binging. Well,
half a pint is 1 unit, right?
Yes, it's about 2 units.
So, oh my gosh! So you only need 4 beers, and then you're up binging.
Well, we're ladies, Josie, so it's 3 beers for us.
Yeah.
Oh la la.
So it's 200 grams of alcohol per week for a man, and 100 grams for a woman's recommended. But this study, I think they found that anything above 100 grams per week significantly increased your chance of various cancers and cardiovascular disease. So let's all get off the booze.
Yeah, and the reason that alcohol actually can cause cancer is because basically we have this stuff called folate in our bodies. It's a B vitamin that's really important for cell division. And obviously cancer is when your cells divide out of control. So alcohol actually blocks the absorption of folate, and that's why drinking alcohol can lead to cancer. Because I think the link between alcohol and cancer can be a little bit confusing, but that's what it is.
So has anyone put together an answer?
Yeah, I've tried to put together an answer to this. Obviously, there are so many different things that can be bad for your health. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to Google the top worst things for your health. And I was redirected to Men's Health, 25 worst things you can do for your body, which included such things as lack of exercise, fatty food, smoking, drinking, wearing the wrong shoes, and not wearing a condom. Now, also, my favourite thing about this list was that basically I had to get to 25, so it started giving really weird suggestions. But then number 24 was what's bad for your health if you're obsessing over your health. Bear in mind, this is a list that says you should sleep naked and on your side if you want to not get ill.
And you should wee in the shower.
But then, so what I did was I kind of picked a couple of these things and found like the best version. So like people might say that fat's bad for your health, right? Well, then you've got the different types of fat. Like you've got saturated versus unsaturated. The reason it's called unsaturated is because all the carbons aren't like booked up. It's like still got vacancies for some hydrogens, those carbons in those fats. So yeah, polyunsaturated are essential, which means they're needed by our body, but our body can't make them ourselves. And that's things like omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. And they're good because they help reduce low-density lipoprotein cholesterol.
Whoa. These are a lot of long words.
No, I'm using lots of long words. I'm actually been shorten them for you. LDL, cholesterol. Basically, that's like seen as like the bad.
There's bad fats, there's good fats.
There's bad and there's good.
Cool.
And basically polyunsaturated is a good fat. So if we talk about fat being bad for you, then that's the best version of that. Then there's other things which might be bad for you. Like I was like, you know what's really bad for you? Staying inside all the time. And then I was like, well, is that good? Because you're not going to get to the sun, so you're not going to get skin damage. But actually staying inside all the time means your like internal body rhythms get messed up. So we've got our circadian rhythms, which are the rhythms that determine when we sleep and determine all sorts of things like our body's internal rhythms. And the sun is like really important for setting them in the right rhythm. So it's been shown that like old people that live in nursing homes have really poor sleep, not because they're old or because of the medication they're taking necessarily, but because the lighting in nursing homes is on all the time. So their body just gets confused and their rhythms get messed up. It's like they're constantly jet lagged. So staying inside actually probably isn't that good either. So I don't know, the best bad thing for your health, I haven't come to a conclusion. I guess it depends what your priorities are.
What do you guys think about coffee? Like when I say coffee for health.
Well, what I found was that coffee generally is all right, but if you have over 4 coffees a day, so that's 28 cups a week, the risk of you dying from any cause is increased by 56%. Yeah,
that's
is
a
that
lot
just because
of
of like linked behaviour with the kind of person who would drink that much coffee?
Exactly. So maybe I don't know if it's correlation or causation, but coffee seemed to be an all right one generally.
So there was a really, really big study that came out last year from the best cohort of people ever called the EPIC cohort, which is the European Prospective Investigation into Cancer and Nutrition. This is like the biggest cohort study of people ever. It's got 500,000 people. So if you think like clinical trials and like normal medical statistics, it's like a few hundred maybe. Like, do you know how many were in that hallucinogenic trial?
I really can't remember. I feel like it was like 18.
Yeah, so you think
Small.
18 versus 500,000. So any effect you find in a 500,000 size
Those
cohort,
p-values.
that's going to be a sick-ass p-value. Yeah.
P-value means that it's a measure of how significant it is. So these results are going to be really significant and important. And the results are...
And the results are that... so I actually found in this study that people who drank coffee had a lower risk of all-cause mortality from drinking coffee.
Of what mortality?
All-cause mortality. So death by any cause. So
Yeah.
like cancers, like heart disease. So the interesting
Not
thing
in
is,
decaf.
they even found this effect with people who drank only decaf. So it's something that's not to do with the...
Maybe it's a social thing.
So they think, well, maybe it's like linked to, if you drink coffee, you're more likely to have other make other lifestyle choices or other behaviors. But with 500,000 people, you can like control for all of that, right?
Yeah.
So you can think, what is the effect of just coffee? And it is literally, coffee is really good.
I've never
Whatever.
drank a cup of coffee ever.
What?
And
How have
you're
you
very
avoided it?
unhealthy.
Just have.
Is that
Just
true?
never had one. I'll save it up until I'm 80.
You can just smell mine at the moment if you'd like.
Mm.
See how much it energizes you. And now for the Mystery Midsection. Just before we started the show, I gave everyone the following question.
What is a phage?
I then asked everyone to write down a fictional but reasonable sounding answer. I will now read out all of those answers with the real answer mixed in. Everyone will then get the chance to decide which answer they think is right. Answer number 1. A phage is akin to a mage, but performs phagic instead of magic. Answer number 2. A virus that makes its living by infecting other pathogens, e.g. bacteria, a bit like a hyperparasite. Answer number 3. A phage is a gram-positive bacterium with a slime coat, as an extra layer of defense against antibiotics. Answer number 4. A phage is a virus that infects and replicates within bacteria. Answer number 5. It's when you've been friends with someone for ages. You've been phages. So, gang, does anyone need any recap? What do we think?
There are two that are very similar in there.
Is phagic more powerful than magic?
Obviously. It's like super extra special magic.
Only performed by a phage in a golden cloak.
So, Matt, I want to know what you think about these because I think the rest of us might have an inkling on the answer. What do you think?
Well, I mean, we've obviously got phagic, which I think is convincing.
Mm-hmm.
And so is phages, long-term friends.
Mm-hmm.
So those are kind of my they're in my top 3. Along with there were 2 answers that were very similar, weren't there?
Yeah, there were.
Suspiciously similar.
I have no idea what you're talking about. I may have rummaged through a few pieces of paper before the show, and I thought maybe I could do a bit of...
How many
maybe I
answers
could
did you
win
put in,
this.
James?
They were all my answers. That was the
James's.
secret.
Okay, I'm gonna go with the hyperparasite one.
Which one?
The first one, the one that was
The
longer.
longer one.
Yeah.
The longer one, okay. James, what are you going to go for?
So, I mean, okay, so I haven't been on this before. So am I trying to win or can I just say what I like?
Say whatever you like, mate.
I want to go for phage then, because if that's not a thing, I think it should definitely be a
Phage
thing.
is in mage.
Phage, sorry, yeah.
I want
I mean,
to
they're
like
all
a magic-
phage
like
things,
a-
aren't they?
like phagic,
Yeah,
phage.
phagic. Yeah, I thought that was very good.
What's wrong with? But what about phages? That's also a humorous wordplay answer.
But I think,
one
yeah,
might
I mean,
enjoy.
I suppose so. But I mean, I don't have any friends with a PH.
Who said it was spelled with a PH? We haven't seen the spelling of phage.
What do you think, Sophie?
I'm going to go for the virus infecting, but the second one, the shorter one.
Oh, la 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 la. Well, as I can reveal to you, so the second one, which Sophie chose, is the one that I wrote down as the correct one, but I'm sure that the other one is it means exactly the same thing, and they're both correct.
Yeah, but the point is, Josie, is that's the one that you wrote down, and so I could tell that was the real one. So actually,
so yeah, I mean, if anyone
don't take this away from me.
So like, what a phage is it's like a possible future like antibiotic, in that it'll like go and sit on it'll go sort of into a bacteria and then replicate loads of times until the bacteria bursts.
Yeah.
And that's how it would like act as a antibiotic. And like the full name is bacteriophage,
yes.
which comes from the Greek from to devour bacteria. How cool is that?
Wow.
So who came up with the mage one?
Me.
And who came up with the other phage one?
I made it up and it happens to be right. Isn't that amazing? Natural scientist.
So the only one in that one who didn't actually get anything at all was Mr. Shriftman.
Well, yeah, I think we could always edit this one out of the podcast.
so it didn't both of my answers get chosen? So does that mean that I win because I got the phage?
Everybody wins.
Yeah, right.
Okay, I've got a question. If you can get an asteroid belt, could you theoretically get a sun belt? Like a belt of suns.
It sounds quite stylish.
You mean for your trousers or?
Yeah,
just generally?
exactly.
I mean, there aren't really belts that can fit people of larger sizes anyway. It's very frustrating. So I can't imagine there's one out there that can fit the sun. Suns come in like lots of different sizes, do they? Josie Peters, resident astrophysicist.
Hello.
Size range
Well, there's a lot of different sizes of stars, don't you know? You can get them from, I don't know how small the smallest one is, but definitely like a fraction of the size of the sun.
In this room, mate, smallest star right here.
He's pointing at himself.
But you can get some stars as big as 200 times the sun. And we think that if you go back like really early in the universe's history, because the conditions are different, you may get even bigger stars than that.
That's like 200 times the radius, right? So it's much bigger volume.
Times the mass.
Oh, okay.
All these things are always in times of mass.
Oh, okay. Oh, I thought it was much bigger than that. Only 200 times our sun.
I think like if you look around our galaxy today, maybe 1/200. But if you go back even further to sort of like the beginnings of the universe, when you've only got very, very simple elements around, and the universe is like a bit denser and everything's all a bit more free and breezy. Because the way that the conditions are, you basically build a star by letting a big cloud of gas collapse, and the clouds, when there are fewer different crazy elements, the clouds are allowed to get bigger before they collapse, so then you can then form larger stars, is what we think.
Would there be a limit? Why would there be a limit on the size?
Just to do with sort of the point of which you can get enough gas to also be sort of dense enough
in like
as well.
the same like body.
Yeah, and that it can then collapse
before it
in
then
on
starts
itself.
collapsing in. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. What actually are asteroid belts? Like, how do they form?
So when you form a star, everything sort of collapses onto sort of a flat pancakey kind of plane. And in the middle, you have your nice, freshly born star. So hot. And around the edge, you have lots of bits of like dust. And well, they're called planetesimals. They're like little things that can construct planets. And they gradually clump together. And then you start getting planets forming. And asteroids are kind of like bits of leftover bits of rock that haven't formed planets.
So I heard that like the rings of Saturn are sort of like almost like little moons forming. And there's one being born called Phoebe, right? That's sort of on its way. It's like coming together.
Another royal baby.
Is that true? Like, I think the rings of Saturn are going to disappear within the next few 100,000 years.
Yeah, it's a good analogy. Like, I think if I'm right, I think like all planets originally had some sort of little belt of rings, but Saturn's still got its going on. Like Uranus would have had some as well, and Neptune.
So asteroid belts are essentially like the ones that got picked last for the team. It's like they haven't been picked yet, so they're left over. So a sun belt would be the same, right? All the loser suns following each other around.
But then they form their own team because they're like going to form moons, which are like, you know, like B division planets.
Yeah, our asteroid belt is it? I mean, Josie, you can maybe correct me on this, but I heard that 1/3 of the entire asteroid belt's mass is one single like lump called Ceres or Keras. Is that right?
Oh,
it's like so it's basically like a dwarf planet almost. It's like it's the only asteroid that's like spherical.
Yeah, so it's spelled Ceres.
Yeah, how do you pronounce that?
Yeah, I think Ceres series.
Can we get definition, an asteroid belt does it have to be around a planet? I went as soon as
around the sun.
So it's around a sun.
So around the sun, we've got Mercury orbiting, then Venus, then Earth, then Mars, and then there's like a load of scattered asteroids that orbit in a kind of
it's in between, isn't it?
ellipse.
Oh yeah.
They're in an ellipse as well, right?
In-betweeners.
I just needed a little reminder.
And then we've got the big gassy lumpy ones. Speaking of the big gassy lumpy ones, did you know that Jupiter doesn't orbit the sun? This is one of those things that like sounds like, whoa, what does it orbit? But actually it sort of orbits the sun. Did you know this?
No, go on.
It's so heavy, it's so much heavier than the other planets in the solar system that it actually orbits a point just outside the sun, because the center of mass between Jupiter and the sun is just outside it. And so the sun and Jupiter both orbit this point. So the sun's got this little wobble caused by Jupiter.
That's a cool way as well. That's how that's one technique of which astronomers use to detect planets around other stars as well.
So if ones.
Yeah, so often you get sort of planets that are called hot Jupiters. They're even bigger than sort of our Jupiter. And yeah, as you said, they have this little wobble between the star and the planet. And you can, if you have very precise measurements, then you can measure this wobble and infer that, there must be a planet going around the star.
So obviously you have like Jupiter and Saturn's rings, but what about Earth's rings? Because we're just like jettisoning stuff into the atmosphere. Jettisooning things to an unprecedented rate into the atmosphere, right? So where's that going?
You mean like space junk and stuff like that?
Yeah, space junk. Yeah, isn't there like a ring of space junk forming around Earth?
Does that mean we'll get like a space junk planet?
God, it's like something from Futurama, isn't it?
It's legit like something that we're having to sort out. So ESA, the European Space Agency, I'm sure NASA's probably doing something as well, and everybody else. But I know that ESA is developing some sort of like, is harpoon the right word? You know, with a net, where you send this kind of net out into space and it will go and collect a load of space junk. Because it genuinely is a problem, because if it gets too much junk around the Earth, then we won't be able to send stuff out there anymore because it will be traveling so fast. I think the satellites are further away than the space junk is, but the point is that you'd have to get through that space junk to get out into space. So, it's called like the runaway effect, Kessler syndrome. As more and more bits sort of collide into each other, then even smaller specks get sent off and then they get even faster. And it's just so dangerous.
Let's never go to space again.
Send our special giant Hoover.
What are you going to do with all that junk surrounding the Earth? Send a harpoon.
So has anyone got an answer to this?
Hi guys, it's me, the resident astronomer. It's Josie Peters. Well, here I am. So I thought about this question on two different scales. So the first one I thought about was sort of a smaller-ish scale. So what we know is that stars form in clusters. So you have sort of a big group of stars kind of form all at once in the same space. And so I thought, surely there must be a cluster or something like that, of which it is in a ring. It turns out there is a giant gas star system called the Gould Belt, which is named after Benjamin Gould, who identified it in 1879. And it is a donut-shaped ring of stars.
Whoa.
And it's the closest of these types of systems to us, to our sun. And it contains lots of these very big blue stars that live fast, die young. So like the Gould Belt sort of system itself is only like between 30 to 50 million years old, which in astronomy terms is like nothing. It's like really like prepubescent, like super young, wee babby stars. Well, big fat babby stars.
Also a nickname of mine.
Just putting it into context, like the sun is already 4.6 billion years old. So 30 to 50 million is like
nada.
So that's kind of cool. It's like this nice little donut. It's got about 100,000 masses of sun in it. Some of the gas in there is as hot as 1,000,000 degrees.
What's the hottest thing? Like, what is the hottest anything can be?
The hottest place that we know of in the universe is just like south of Oxford, mate. Culham.
Oh, mate. Cool.
200 million degrees.
Oh, the fusion place.
The jet facility, yeah.
Oh, it was a genuine point.
That was just some...
So yeah, this Gould Belt is pretty cool. And people aren't really sure how it formed. The idea that I think sounds the funnest, so there are a couple of other ideas where it could be that clouds are colliding, or that maybe a cloud is colliding with a thing called a spiral density wave, which basically makes the galaxy have a nice, pretty shape. And when I say cloud, I mean a cloud of gas, not like the ones we have. But the funnest idea was one that there's like an enormous, gigantic hypernovae, which is like, if you've heard of a supernova before, it's 10 times those. A supernova are some of like the most energetic things in the universe. They can outshine their entire galaxy when they happen. So it's like the star collapses and dies and gets really bright. But there's some idea from someone somewhere that there was like this enormous hypernovae where this big star like collapsed and shot out all this gas around an expanding ring and then caused the Gould Belt that way, which I thought was really cool.
Wow, that's
cool.
cool.
Oh.
Nice.
And if you want to go even bigger, super quick.
No, we can't.
One tiny big thing.
Can't take any more.
This one is very quick. If you want to go even bigger, there are galaxies called ring galaxies, which they are a ring of stars, so you much bigger scale. Which I thought, or maybe you have like a galaxy and then a small one kind of like shoots on past through it, and the gravitational interactions reshape the galaxy into a ring of stars. If you want to see one, there's one called Hoag's galaxy, which actually might have thought to be formed in a different way, but looks really cool.
Wait, sorry, a small galaxy shoots through a bigger galaxy. What shoots through the galaxy, sorry?
Yeah, so a smaller galaxy might be passing through, so it could just be like the trajectory of where the galaxy is going, could be surrounded by other things where it's kind of passing through. But then because of the way that the gravity interacts with both of them causes the larger galaxy to sort of go out in a ring shape.
Whoa.
Oh,
Google the Hoag's galaxy. Yeah, it's cool.
that's amazing. If you liked it, you should have put a ring on it of suns.
Josie, what's your question for us today?
How high would you have to build a water slide to take you from London to New York?
Oh.
New York.
How gnarly does the water slide have to be?
Oh, totally gnarly, dude.
Okay, well that's putting it higher.
It depends how steep it would be. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, like, if you want to get there quickly, I mean, how quickly you want to get there determines the steepness of the slide. Like, it's like sliding like Tenerife that's like basically like vertical.
Biggest slide in the world, 168 feet tall.
Wait, what's that,
What's that in meters?
I don't know.
Be like 50?
Where is that slide?
It's in Kansas City, Missouri, the Show Me State. But actually, it closed a couple of years ago for quite a morbid reason because somebody had a fatal accident. So
You see?
Did you just say that Kansas was the show me state?
Missouri is the Show Me State.
Oh, Missouri.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Really
Show
interesting.
me.
It's
Is it
like,
just like
it's like, you know, I have to see it to believe it, sort of thing.
it's a very mistrusting people?
Very mistrusting people, notoriously so. Missourians.
The slide would have to have a passport check on it as you went along the slide, right?
Well, I think there'd be a slide next door and the passport person would head off with you at the same time.
Oh, okay.
One of those turning around slides, like a spiral
Yeah,
slide.
they'd be
so
kind of
they stay in
handling
the
you.
same
'Cause,
spot.
yeah, they'd be traveling at the same speed as you down a thing, and they'd be like,
Yeah.
"Could you pass me your passport, please?" You'd be like, "Yeah."
What's the
You'd be
purpose
like-
of your visit?
You'd maybe compliment their swimming trunks just to make sure that you're all, you know,
And what
the
then?
vibe is good.
And then if the passport doesn't show, you just like push them off the slide and be like, "No New York for you." There's a good point though. How can you take any luggage, or you just have it like behind you and on a rubber ring?
on its the luggage slide, obviously. It's a separate slide. You wouldn't put them in the same place.
Good point.
Would you have first class and economy class?
Like a
Slides.
slightly rougher slide
Slides.
for economy.
Slightly more
More gnarly.
slide.
You get a less nice meal.
So obviously, as a kid, we all wanted to have slides in our houses when we were older, right?
Yeah.
Who still has
Speak
that
for yourself,
dream?
mate.
Who still has that dream? Because I do. Yeah. Do you still have it, James?
I've never had it.
Never wanted a
Slides,
slide.
they're terrifying. They're well tall and they're really fast.
You could have a small slanty one if you wanted.
Small
It's your
slanty.
slide.
My slide would be parallel to the ground. Thank you very much.
Your slide would be
That
a
would be
gutter.
safe. No,
Your
that would be
slide
safe.
would be a gutter.
Oh, have you guys heard about this thing with the most efficient way to get trains from one place to another is to have like a tube and like loads of pressure building up behind the train. So this is one of the original designs of trains was to have tubes in which you, and then the carriages would be the same size as the tube, and they'd have like rubber seals around them. Although actually they designed them with leather, which is one of the reasons they abandoned it, because they thought the leather would rot or rats would eat it or something. And they just build up pressure behind it, and then eventually they release the carriage, and it just goes pew down the tube, and it way more energy efficient than the trains we have now.
You know the Hyperloop that they want to do? And
exactly, yes. So this is
it?
them going back to the same design. Yeah, so really
well
expensive
cool.
to build the track, but that goes between LA and San Fran, right?
Yeah.
But incredibly fast and efficient, energy efficient way to travel once it's finished.
The Hyper what? Sorry,
Yeah,
what was
I
it
just
called?
gonna
Is
say
the Hyperloop a different thing?
Hyperloop.
That is the Hyperloop.
No, I think
right?
it's the Hyperloop. Yeah,
Yeah, it's another one of Elon Musk's
things.
futurology
Elon.
things.
Yeah, but I was thinking about that because I was thinking about like water slides, and when you kind of like stop in the middle and you build up loads of water pressure behind yourself, and maybe some other kids like come down behind you.
You don't deliberately stop in the water slide, do you?
But back in the day, when you like
So dangerous.
no, because it was an
You
interesting
shrimp them.
experiment. I was just experimenting with
It's
the
a dangerous experiment,
science
mate.
of building up water pressure behind me, so that I could go pew like a high-speed hyperloop train.
What, and then you got knocked out by a kid?
Sometimes you would, yeah, but I was also a kid, so I was.
Everyone knows that if a
bouncy.
kid collides with a kid, you just get an adult anyway.
And that's how I got here. Yeah,
You're actually only 6 years old, just very adventurous on water
Top
slides.
half. Does anyone have an actual answer to this with numbers then?
I
Tell
have an
me,
answer.
my dream.
Your
And how much would it cost, I
dream.
wonder?
Your dream is not very reasonable, I'm afraid.
Oh.
I've crunched the numbers. So it is just like this is just like a really basic maths problem. But like, what are the factors that we need to take into account? Go on, pop quiz.
Wait, is this a use of Pythagoras? Because if we can work out the
Yeah,
distance
so-
and we
so we'll
know... Yeah.
There'll be a bit of Pythagoras, yeah.
There's a bit of like
See.
terminal velocity or something.
Bit of
like,
terminal
only there's
velocity,
only
yeah.
so
Coefficient
fast
of
you can
friction.
go.
Oh, mate, you guys know all of this already.
Coefficient.
Together we can solve the water slide problem once and for all.
Boom.
So firstly, distance, London to New York. And does anyone know this interesting fact?
Is it about 5,500 kilometers?
It is 5,500 kilometers.
Yeah, just read it on. I'm literally
It
looking
is.
at James's
You did
paper.
He just read over my
Slimy.
shoulder on my notes.
Slimy
It's
Rolf now.
5,500 kilometers. So we know the distance. So that's like the base. Okay, so what are the forces at play?
Gravity.
Gravity, yeah. So right, we need to take into account gravity. And we need to take into
I'm
account
thinking about it.
coefficient of friction.
Yeah.
Which is
And-
nicely loosened by your water, I guess.
Yep, so water's going to make us very lubricated. And then the last thing's going to be drag. Okay, so
Wait. Have you taken into account that you're going to go really wrinkly on the journey and your friction's going to increase?
I have actually, yeah. I've
actually?
run some simulations.
That's why you look like a prune today.
So yeah, basically like you draw a triangle and you kind of work out, well, I need to go 5,500 kilometers and I need to take into account that as I slide, I'm going to lose energy due to friction and also lose energy due to air resistance, right? So it just becomes a function of the angle of the slide, right? So obviously the kind of steeper the slide, the faster you go, and the faster you go, the easier it is to overcome friction. So it turns out that the angle
But
is
also
about...
the bigger the angle, the higher the slide has to be, right?
And the higher the slide
so we
has
want
to
the
be, yeah.
smallest angle possible.
Yeah, so the question is, what's the smallest angle we need? And the angle's about 17 degrees, which
Whoa.
corresponds to a height of 1,113 kilometers
Wow.
high.
1,113
13
kilometers.
kilometers.
Yeah,
Wait, how high is the
Is that-
atmosphere? How
Yeah, is that
it's
like in
12
space?
kilometers. It's like the effective atmosphere is about 12
That's
kilometers
how high the slide would have
Yeah.
to be.
It's-
So if it was 17 degrees off the ground in London,
yeah.
it would then...
Oh, so where the slide meets the ground in
Yeah.
New York, that angle's 17
Oh,
degrees.
so we're doing it that way around, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's pretty high, and I there's a lot of factors that you've had to assume. So I've assumed using my own weight, 75 kilograms, and I want to get there at 10 meters per second.
Oh,
And
yeah,
that
so
would-
how long would it take you?
That would take me just under a week.
A week?
Yeah, it'd take me a week, a week of sliding. Can you imagine? Such
So it's
fun.
got the onboard meals
Might
are decent.
start to lose its charm.
I
Yeah.
think you'd start to make really good friends with the passport control person.
That's so
It is
long.
high,
A
yeah.
week. That's
and
amazing.
that's going quite fast as well. And obviously, and that's assuming that so I had to assume, what's the friction between you and the slide, right? So obviously if you've actually got a real water slide, that makes it really complicated because you have like turbulence and rapids and stuff. So I've just assumed that water's like a lubricant here. So it's like 100 kilometers per hour. But anyway, so that would be if you wanted to go down a straight line. But there's also what if you want to get there as fast as possible? So things like, what if you want to get there as quick as possible? So a straight line is obviously like really inefficient for that, right? So they actually solved this in like 1700s. It's called a brachistochrone curve. So this is the optimal curve for getting from an elevated point A to some lower down point, a distance away, point B.
Wow.
So the idea is if I drop like a ball at point A and it rolls down this curve, it'll get there as fast as possible. And so basically, if you kind of trace this curve, that gives you the fastest curve to drop a bead down. And the interesting property of this curve is if you start a bead at any point on this curve, regardless of where you start it, it will always hit the bottom at exactly the same time.
So how fast is it when you
Sick.
do it in the fastest way?
22 minutes.
Wow!
Yeah,
Wait,
but
and how high is that one?
You'd probably
And this one is, how high was it? 3,544 kilometers.
Oh, yikes.
So quite
22 minutes to New York.
Yeah, but I did assume no friction and no air resistance.
I guess there is nowhere
Because
once
it
you
gets
get
a
that
lot more
high.
complicated.
And we have arrived at the end. Points have been allocated by Sam Lee, our producer, according to a system that none of us understands. Sam, what's the verdict?
Gripped as the world appears to be in the mania of Waterslide travel, the latest branch terminus of the network has been installed here in the Piece of String studio, and I was sure to make a note of the style in which each of you landed in the pool we're now subsequently recording in, with points awarded for technical skill in the air. Commiserations, Matthew, your manful belly flop just didn't quite cut it this week. Josie scored third place. That very elegant somersault in the air was just marred by stubbing your toe as you went in. James in second. I admired your leap through the rubber ring just as you came off, but I thought it was maybe a little clumsy compared to the dart-like high-speed entry of Sophie, who clocked an impressive 50 miles per hour at the end there. First place, nice and efficient.
Thank you. Efficiency is my middle name.
For now, thanks to Josie Peters,
Goodbye.
Sophie Ward,
Thank you very much.
James Hay, our special guest,
See you later.
and Matthew Shribman, that's me, and our producer, Sam Lee, and to Unbound for their generosity in hosting and supporting us. You can follow us on social media by searching A Piece of String or String Podcast.
If you'd like to find out more about astronomy and astrophysics, you can find me on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and the internet at Josie A. Peters or josieapeters.com.
And if you want to see me talk about bits of human biology and psychology that I find interesting, check me out at Soph's Notes on YouTube and Twitter.
And if you'd like to learn about many and various scientific curiosities from a man in a bath, you can follow me on social media by searching Science in the Bath or Matthew Shribman.
If you want to find James Hay, just go to Club Penguin and find my avatar, JamesHay_Penguin69.
If you have a quirky question of your own that you'd like a scientific answer for, then please reach out to us on any of our social media channels.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back again in a fortnight, and as usual, let's never speak of any of this ever again.